Beyond the Pew. We're back.
We're back.
We are back.
Another day.
Another episode.
Another togetherness.
Another day, another episode. I don't think that's a word. Another togetherness.
Episode 28 for sure.
I don't think it's 28. I don't know what it is, though.
24.
Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
What the question, though, is it's not episode 37. By episode 37, though, we have a goal in mind that you, Erick Gill, Pastor Reverend Erick, well, not Reverend yet.
Not Reverend.
Pastor Erick Gill.
You're the Reverend.
You're going to be ordained.
And Bishop.
You're going to be ordained.
And Elder.
But you're going to be ordained here shortly.
And Stephen. Oh.
Erick Gill, MDiv. So what is the number, Pastor?
Tell the
Erick
people, man.
Gill?
Tell the people.
Right here. I got 3 so far.
Yeah.
330. 4.
Get 'em?
Nope. No.
Oh, we're not there.
Nope. It's 330-331-6453.
That's easy. 330-331.
6453.
6453.
So what I've been saying. If it's easy, why don't you know it? Because I've been saying that for the past
Well, I have never been paying
25
attention to
episodes.
that. I was too now.
boy, oh boy. Glad to have Pastor Steve Bogren with us.
Be back.
Glad to be back
He's back.
here
Steve,
with
this is
you guys.
episode 3 for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Episode
Yeah,
3.
you're getting just as dedicated as Erick because there's only one person in this room right now that's been here for every podcast
Hey,
episode.
who's that?
That would be me.
Bruce, Reverend.
But Steve,
Reverend.
you're catching up.
If you're home or driving
catching
wherever,
up.
take a moment and clap at Pastor Bruce.
Yeah,
Don't
Reverend
clap when you're
Bruce.
driving.
Thank
though,
you.
please.
No, if you're on the stoplight.
Stop.
Appreciate that. Erick, feeling good about the Yankees?
Absolutely.
Even though you're not that invested
The
in
baby.
baseball
Who's your favorite
anymore?
player? Who's
You're
your
not
favorite
invested
player?
anymore.
The baby.
Yep.
Who's your favorite player?
When the Yankees...
All time?
Yeah.
A-Rod.
A-Rod.
Really?
Now,
So
do
you
you
Before he
like
came
people
out.
who use steroids? And,
No, before that came out.
So before that. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And then after that, it was Tatis. And then he
Tatis.
came out.
Yeah.
No, it was.
So I'm done rooting for people.
Yeah. When the Yankees lost the first game to the Indians, Guardians, you had made a comment after the Yankees lost,
Yeah,
and you
I
said, "Yeah, I don't really care about baseball anymore."
Yeah, I'm
But
always,
now
I
all
was,
of a sudden
I was
you're
mad
like
and bitter.
diehard-
Well, of course.
you're diehard Yankees
You're
guy.
happy when you're winning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's life. That's why you're happy because I've never seen anybody more jacked up about the Bills than you are.
Well, I'm very much a diehard Bills fan.
Yeah, because they're winning.
Who's your favorite?
I've been that way since I was a little
No.
kid. Yep.
Hey, who's your favorite Bills fan of all time? Oh, player. Sorry.
Of all time, there's a couple. I'm a big Jim Kelly fan, Thurman Thomas fan.
Oh, Thurman Thomas.
Thurman
Hold on.
Thomas.
Time out.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
ever met?
Have you ever
Jim
met any of
Kelly,
those players?
Thurman Thomas, anything like
Yes,
that?
yes.
Oh, who'd you meet?
I've met Thurman Thomas actually.
Well, tell us the story a little bit on that.
last
man.
week I met
Last
Thurman
week.
Thomas. Yeah. Yep. It's a long
Did you
story.
get
you get
signed
pictures?
anything?
I got a signed helmet from Thurman
Get 'em.
Thomas.
Wow. Bottom shelf,
it's in
middle
my
shelf,
office.
Top
Top
shelf.
It's in my office. If anybody wants to stop by and see it, but my door's locked.
yeah.
But if they want to come by and see it, they can come by and see it.
Nice.
Take a picture.
Let's get
of it.
into some of these questions.
All right,
today.
let's dive in.
We started last week talking a little bit about parenting, and we're going to get to that in a minute as well. Pastor Steve back with us, and want to just ask his thoughts on some things about parenting and some insights there. But before we get there, there's a couple questions we want to get to that have been submitted. The one in particular, I'm pretty excited to hear you guys' response to. That I'm pretty excited about this, and so either one of you can take this first.
Steve.
But
Erick,
this is
Erick,
pretty.
Erick,
It's
yes.
pretty
This is
timely.
your show.
It's pretty timely for what recent events have happened in our world. Okay, with the hurricane that came through, Ian that, just devastated so much of Florida. But here's the question that was submitted to us. Are natural disasters God's wrath being poured out? Are natural disasters God's wrath being poured out? Is God's wrath being poured out on the earth right now? If so, does that mean God's wrath is being poured out on believers? So, are natural disasters God's wrath being poured out? Is God's wrath being poured out right now on the earth? If so, does that mean God's wrath is poured out on believers?
What do you think, Eric?
Those are 3 questions.
So what's the first
So
question?
the first one is can God's wrath happen?
Are natural disasters God's wrath being poured out?
I would say that not every single one of them has to be under that category, but you can see from the Old Testament that there are instances where God will do that. That He will use natural disasters to bring justice to the people that opposes Him or to the nations that are against Him. I give you an example. You have the promise that He gave to Abraham that to any nation that blesses you, I'll bless, and any nation that opposes you, I would oppose. The promise to the nation of Israel. And so you see throughout the nation of Israel at times that natural disasters will take place as a way of justice.
Okay.
But I'm not sitting here, and I don't think anyone can sit here and say that every time there's a natural disaster that's God's justice per se.
I think it's part of the fall
Yeah.
as well. Like the things that happen in our world is because of the fall as well. So, but I mean, God is in control of everything as well.
Yeah.
So that's where the tricky part is. Like I do believe even God can use natural disasters to wake up a nation, or even situations in their life that we use. I was talking to an individual that a big, you would look at it like why that happened to him, but he said God used that to wake him up to realize where he was in a relationship with the Lord. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
good. That's good.
What else? What's the second
what's
part?
that?
Well, you don't have anything to share to that?
Yeah.
About disasters,
Yeah,
natural
go ahead.
disasters, God's wrath being poured out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a starting point would be the question of, does God have all authority over wind, waves, land, sea, everything? And the answer to that would be an obvious yes. God has complete authority over that. I think Jesus' miracle where he calms the wind and the waves on the sea when he says, peace, be still. Questions asked of Jesus in the Gospels, the disciples say, what manner of man is this that even the wind and waves obey him? So we see it established in Scripture that God is in complete control of all of the natural elements that are in the world, land, sea, sky, everything. So the wind and waves even obey him. So I think it would be one thing to say, is a natural disaster that occurs specifically occurring because it is a demonstration of the wrath of God being poured out upon man for some reason of sin.
Yeah.
Or the question of, does God allow those natural disasters to take place? And so I think we would have to say, obviously, God allows those to take place.
Yeah.
Whether or not we can know the motivation or reasoning behind those, that's in God's hands.
Yeah.
That's the knowledge of God would be the only knowledge that would know that. We would not know that. But could God use natural disasters as a result of the sinfulness of man and to show a demonstration of wrath? He could.
Yeah.
But we don't have the ability to know if that's why. Now, there's been this is a very interesting question because there's been some prominent leaders, Christian leaders even, that have said, when a hurricane happens, when a tornado happens, when an earthquake happens, this is the wrath of God being poured out because he's angry about sin. And listen, could that be true? I guess it could be true.
Yeah.
But does that mean that that's the reason? No. I mean, we live in a sinful, fallen world, back to your point, where death and chaos and pain and heartache and all of that is going to be a reality of the world we live in. But to answer the question simply, are natural disasters God's wrath being poured out? They can be, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are.
Correct.
So,
What's the second part?
is God's wrath being poured out on the earth right now? And if so, does that mean God's wrath is being poured out on believers?
I will say that to that again. It follows the same answer. I would say, does God allow those things? Is God in control of those things happening? Absolutely. Nothing in this world wouldn't happen without His allowance.
Sure.
But to say that everything that is currently happening is for the purpose of wrath, I think that is hard for us to come to that conclusion. Could it be a possibility? Absolutely. Like we said, there are examples in the Old Testament where God did that. But to say that every single time that is occurring, it is because of the wrath of God, I think that will be a stretch. And like you say, like something that it will be hard to prove to be true, And then to the other symbol, or to the other extent, was about, if that's the case, then are believers dealing with the wrath of God? I would reference back to like the nation of Israel, how when there were people that opposed God, that the nation of Israel, where some of them had to suffer, and it was an attempt for them to recognize, and even those that were kind of like bystanders had to take a responsibility to mend things and to take ownership. Like I think about the golden calf, that great story, how the moment that Moses disappeared, or not disappear, he goes to the mountains, he's talking with God, he's there for 40 days, and then the moment that he has been there for a while, the people started to feel like, hey, but we need a God, we need to make someone that to make us God. They go to Aaron, they say, hey, can you make a golden calf for us? He makes a golden calf for us, and then they went out and started saying, these are the gods that brought us out of Egypt. Not God, but this golden calf that we just crafted a few minutes ago, right? And then you see that when Moses comes down and he brings wrath on those people, and he goes out and kill him, there had to be a group up there, the Levites, that needed to step up, take ownership, and recognize that even though they may have been caught on the crossfire, if you want to call that, it was an opportunity for them to step up and be an example to those that were lost. It's an opportunity for them to be set apart, And so I think that if that was the case, that a believer was to find themselves in the crossfire of God's wrath, it is not that necessarily God is attacking the believer, but it's an opportunity for the believer to stand up, to be an example for those that are hurting, to be an example for those that are lost, and demonstrating in their life how they are set apart.
So you would say that the wrath of God is currently seen as being poured out on the earth?
No, I said no.
It's not.
I said that there is no, it's hard to tell.
Okay.
I don't think that anyone in this room has the ability to say, yeah, the Hurricane Ian.
Yeah, not even specifically with that, but I think the question was just, is God's wrath being poured out on the earth right now, and does that mean God's wrath is being poured out on believers?
I don't think that that anybody can come to a conclusion like that. I mean, yes, certainly God can use things to bring people to their knees at times, but to sit here and to say that every single time is because of His wrath, I feel like that's a trash.
Yeah.
Back to Steve's point, this is not the original design that God has for the world, but as a result of the fall, those things happen.
Yeah.
I think for like the believer though, it's when you see the natural disasters, it's for me, it's like more of a like examine my own life, kind of thing. Like okay, like kind of, even if like things I've been through my own life too, like all right, Lord, I need to learn from this, and it's not so much worrying about the problem, but focusing on the one that can fix the problem, which is Jesus, and kind of saying, okay, God, like is there areas in my life that I need to change?
Yeah.
Hebrews talks about that, to lay aside every weight or sin that holds you cleanly and look only at Jesus. So. Not that every natural disaster is the wrath of God, but I think for the believer side, we just gotta take those moments. And say, okay, God, where are we personally with you, but also the country that I'm in, where are we at? And that to me helps me to see, again, not to say that God uses it for His wrath, but it should be more of an examination of our own spiritual relationship with the Lord through.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. So. I'm not sitting here saying this was the wrath of God happening, but I think that is an interesting example. So Dominican Republic, Haiti, one island. They share one island. There's not as smaller than the state of New Jersey. I mean, it's very, very tiny of an island. And I can't remember. I think it was 2007. I can't remember exactly what year, but there was that earthquake that happened. It was like 7 point something. It was like horrendous. I mean, even to this day, there's still like leftovers of the effect of the hurricane. The country has never been able to recover from it, and I will never forget because I was still living in the DR when this happened. So you had these two countries that shared the same island. That's both, even though it happened, the epicenter of this earthquake was in Haiti. That the Dominican Republic should have had the similar or the exact effect on the island as Haiti did. I mean, it was so powerful that people in Florida felt it. In Puerto Rico, they felt it. How come then someone like in the Dominican Republic, they didn't get any cases? I mean, maybe a building there or here and there cracked or fell or something, and then all this catastrophe happened in Haiti. How is that possible? And so, my tendency is to look at the two differences, and you have a country that is not every single individual, but as a whole, they're a country that is devoted to witchcraft, is devoted to voodoo, is devoted to all of this like dark magics and all of this satanic practice. Not everybody, not individuals, but as a whole, that is the majority of the culture there. And then you see the Dominican Republic, that is not like we're not holy here or anything, but you have a lot of people there that they are devoted Christians, that they're constantly praying, and they're not ashamed of that. And it makes you wonder, like, why didn't the DR get affected the way that Haiti got affected?
Sure.
And I have my own theory of why that happened, but I just thought that I think that would be an example of that. Like, was that God's wrath on Haiti?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think they're two important questions. my mind goes to Romans 1, where the Bible talks about the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against man. So I would say the answer to the question of is God's wrath being poured out on the earth right now, I would say to an extent it is. The great wrath of God that ultimately will be poured out on the earth, where the heaven and the earth will be destroyed, and new heavens, new earth will be created. That ultimate wrath of God will be seen in the conclusion of what we have scripturally with prophetic events. But Romans 1 says the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. And it goes on to say, what God then, therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth of God for a lie. He says God gave them up to dishonorable passions, and it talks about all of the sins that would follow that. So in some sense, Romans 1 tells us the answer to the question is yes. To an extent, the wrath of God is seen right now being poured out on the earth because man is being given over to a debased mind to do those things that are contrary to God. And we're reaping the quote-unquote reward of that, the downfall of society and the heartache, pain, sickness, disease, all the things that are happening as a result of sin. And in some ways, Romans 1 seems to indicate that that is a representation of God giving them over to these things as part of his wrath that Paul says in Romans 1 is revealed from heaven against all of the ungodliness and unrighteousness that's in the earth right now. Right. So to some extent, the answer would be yes, it is being seen as being poured out, but not to the full measure of the wrath of God, which will be in the end. Yeah. And when it comes to the believer, I don't think we could ever say that God's wrath is being poured out on believers. Now, being in this world but not of the world, believers being a partaker of the world that we're within, we may feel the effects, and we do, of some of the results of sin on this fallen earth, but we've participated in sin as well. Yeah. But where we have to separate is the wrath of God upon sinful man, the wrath of God, ultimate wrath of God upon sinful man, has been endured by Christ on our behalf as a believer. So we will not suffer the great wrath of God, the ultimate condemning wrath of God, but we are, being in this world, going to be those that will be dealing with the consequences of sin and the wrath of God that is being revealed currently against mankind because of their sinfulness. And so it's an interesting question, and I think you guys are both correct in that we can't definitively say one way or the other, that's the wrath of God, that's not. That's the wrath of God. But what we can say from Romans is the very giving over of a culture, of a society, of a people to debased minds, to things that are not according to godliness, that are completely contrary to what God says should be true of individuals. That is a representation or demonstration of God's wrath, that he's given them over to those things. Yeah. And you can see the destructiveness it causes. Yeah. And some of that we're talking about in church, in the series that we've been in. Yeah. So it's a good question. These are really good questions that were submitted, and I think it's important. So with that in mind, we've been trying to do a little bit on parenting in these podcasts last week and this week, and we'll do it for a couple more. And so with this in mind, I had a question that was posed to me last week when I went to a conference in Arizona for missions. Ooh. And when we were coming back from the conference, great, man. From the missions conference, someone on the plane had asked the question, because they knew we were talking and they found out that I have kids, and they had asked me the question that as a pastor, because I told them I'm a pastor, how do I care for or care for, but also teach my kids to handle all that's going on in the world. Mm-hmm. So, like, if your kids are part of, if they go to public school or if they are part of, a church family, if they're out in the world at all, they hear and see things that are quite troubling in the world we live in. And so the person was asking me the question of how, as a parent, do you go about teaching and instructing, caring for your kids in the midst of how bad the world is? And so how would you guys say you go about doing that right
Steve,
now?
I'm going to let you go first, because I would say it's a testament to Steve. I know this is something that he does very well. Even this past Saturday, he took all of his kids, and you do this regularly, but he takes them out, just the kids, knowing just the four of them, and just spend a time of discipleship with them, which I think is remarkable. So I'm going to let you answer it. All that to say, answer it.
Hopefully I answer it correctly. But no, I think it's important that the parent talks about it before they hear it somewhere else. What's the biblical truth? So, I mean, right now, like there are certain movies that we cannot watch, and the question's always why.
Sure.
You know, like why? Why can we watch this movie, this movie? And so that actually this past Saturday is the reason why I took him out for breakfast, just us three to explain like why we couldn't watch that movie that's not honoring, and I explained
Did you
why.
want to say what the movie was?
Huh? Yeah, it was the Buzz Lightyear movie. I mean, it wasn't like a big ordeal or anything like that, but just they had this like same sex relationship, in there, and it vividly showed it, in there too. So we talked about that, just how I explained what marriage, how God intended marriage to be, how God can use that to glorify God, and so I mean, it sounded like they understood it. But having those conversations with your kids, I think it's important. That's something like my parents had with me, especially with, just a different thing. And every generation goes through different things that needs to be. And I think that's why it's so important that parents educate themselves of what's going on. Like, hey, what's out there? What's my kid? Especially teenagers, obviously, knowing what they're looking at TikTok, what they're looking at these different things, so they can have those conversations with their kids and help them understand with that. So yeah, I think it's just educating yourself. Okay, what's my kids' age they're going in? What are they seeing? What are they hearing? And how can I be the first to even have this conversation, but also make a space where they freely want to come and ask me these questions. Like I remember, my son went to a preschool. It was Christian preschool, so they prayed every morning. They prayed before lunch. And then he went to a public school. The first day of school, picked him up, and he's like, "Dad, my school's a little weird." And I was like, "What's going on?" Like, we didn't pray. We didn't pray for our lunch. Like, why is that? And that was the first conversation we, kind of say, well, a lot of people don't believe me. I was like, what, why? So
Sure.
so that was a good conversation I had with him to understand that not everybody has a relationship with the Lord, but it's our responsibility as believers to help them to have a relationship with the Lord. So I think it's just not being afraid of having those conversations, but because I feel like sometimes parents we get a little too late with those conversations. Where I just talked to a friend that he said that he's like, I was too late with this conversation. It's hard to pull them out and help them see the truth. So hopefully that helps.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would add to that is like we really have to understand that someone is going to disciple our kids. Somebody's going to teach our kids something. So it is our responsibility to be the first ones to do that, or the ones that are actually making our lives to do that. Like for us taking that ownership of making sure that we're teaching our kids what is truth. And back to our last episode, we talk about this. You're hinted to this, Steve, like the importance of the parents to understand truth so that we can teach our kids truth, right? And in a world that is filled with so many lies, so many ways that we're bombarding or that they're getting bombarded by, we need to be well-rounded in what we believe to be true so that we can teach our kids that. One thing that I share this with my wife all the time. I said my because of my own life and my own experience, upbringing, I'm finding myself praying more and more and more and more. That I told my wife this. I said I have this belief that what's gonna keep our girls from not falling into the lies of the world is fearing God. Now, we don't really talk much about the fear of God. We think about the fear of God of like being afraid in the sense of like scary movie. But fear of God is more than that. Is like a recognition of who He is. Yeah. It's healthy respect. It's a healthy understanding of the majesty and power and glory of God, and to teach our kids to recognize that this holy and majestic God that cared for us, that loved us, He has set a path for our life, or He has set a guideline for our life that we should follow it. And for us to teach them to understand that, but also recognizing that this majestic and holy God and powerful God is also a just God that will deal with people in the way that they deserve. And I remember growing up that even though that I was not living even though I was a Christian, but not living in a Christian-like way, I remember that it was the fear of God that many times kept me from doing this, because I understood, man, if I do this, if I mess up this way, like, I'm going to get in big trouble. And so I think that I have a responsibility for the parents to teach that to our kids. It's why it's going to keep them from, believing the lies and doing the things that this world want them to do.
Yeah. No, it's good. I mean, that's Deuteronomy, right?
Yep.
Train your children, and to teach them when they rise up and when they lay down and when they're going throughout their day, that we're to be instructing them in God's word. And I think that's so valuable. I know for us with our girls, we try to, similar to what you were saying, Steve, be proactive in talking about things that we know they're going to be hearing, they're going to be listening to. And honestly, I think one of the dangerous things that parents can be guilty of is purposely seeking to be naive about what it is their kids actually are talking about and listening to. There's always those categories of difficult conversations when it comes to relationships, when it comes to puberty, when it comes to sexual relationships, that we kind of shy away from as parents naturally. Like, my kids aren't even talking about that yet. They're not even thinking about that yet. Yes, they are. Depending on their age, if they're in that middle school range, and sometimes even before that, if they're not thinking about it, they're hearing about it, right? And so we have to be willing as parents to do the hard work of being informed about our kids and the culture that they're in, and understanding what challenges they're facing. And it's even more magnified with kids being very active on social media, constantly texting friends and being involved with their friends and everything that's going on in everybody's life. So I would agree we have to get ahead of the game with our kids as parents, where we can be proactive. But the other aspect of it is, I think we have to be okay and not be embarrassed to talk about anything our kids want to talk about.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like, there's a hesitancy on the part of some parents to say, like, it's kind of embarrassing, I don't want to talk about that. I mean, listen, I have 4 girls, and I'm not saying that I do things right, because I do plenty of things wrong. But one of the things that I would hope my girls know from me is, there is nothing they can't come to me out of embarrassment to bring up a subject matter that I'm going to make them feel embarrassed about. I mean, I'm going to be an open book and be like, let's talk about it. And I'm not going to make them feel awkward, about it. But as parents, if we're kind of sheepish about it, like, I kind of want to just touch on this issue, but it's really embarrassing, then our kids are going to think it's embarrassing, as opposed to wanting truth.
And I think you said something really key, like two things to that. It's like I hear, being in ministry, you hear it all the time, the phrase, my kids will never do that.
Yeah.
No, they are. They're doing it. I'll share some statistics. I was doing some research not too long ago about purity and this idea of pornography.
Yeah.
Statistics will say that 98% of students from the age of 98% of students by the age of 12, or guys or boys by the age of 12, have been either introduced or exposed to pornography. 98% of them.
Barna did a study, I remember when I was a youth pastor, that said the average age, so not 98%, but average age of exposure to pornography was 8 years old amongst kids.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
8 years old.
But here's where it gets crazy. So when you think of pornography, you only think sometimes only about the boys. But then the research continued to add, and it says that 96% of girls had either been exposed or introduced to pornography by the age of 12.
Yeah.
And it's insane. And so I'm not saying that every single kid at that age is already addicted to pornography, but to think that our kids at that age are not aware of what life is, that unfortunately, and I made this joke to our students, like, they don't even know how to wipe their butt, and they're watching things that they shouldn't be watching. But the reality is like, if parents weren't, like you're saying, if we're afraid, if we don't really want to talk about those things, like, they're learning. They're talking about it.
Yeah.
And like, we need to be, we shouldn't be afraid of speaking truth to them. We need to teach them what is acceptable and what is right.
Yeah. And if I could tell parents, don't be willfully ignorant.
No. Yeah.
Right?
No.
Some parents are willfully, blissfully ignorant. And parents can make statements saying, like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know what my kids, you should want to know.
Yeah.
And if you're not wanting to know, you're not doing what you should be doing as a parent. Like, you should want to know. And I'm talking, to us as well. I mean, we don't do everything right.
No.
Right? I mean, we fail in all kinds of categories. And there are times, and this is the other thing I would say with this as parents, it's okay when you responded wrongly or didn't do something the way that would honor God, to go to your kid and say, hey, I got to apologize for the way I handled that. I need to ask your forgiveness if we did something that would be displeasing to God, and let the kids know that we're not infallible, right? There's going to be times that we might mess up. We might make mistakes as parents out of our concern and love for them, but we're not perfect. And so we need kids to be able to understand, we don't want to be the ones that are always telling them what they're doing wrong. and never admit when we're wrong. So like we have to be able to check our pride as parents to be able to say when we're wrong as well. But so piggyback off all this, I get the get ahead of things, explain things, instruction to our kids about the things they'll be dealing with. But what is it that you say or you try to instill in your kids or remind your kids or teach your kids about there's evil in the world? How do you keep them encouraged? Like, what do you try to how do you go about seeking to be an encourager to them in the midst of how bad things are?
Yeah.
What do you
Like
for
for us every night before my kids go to bed, I always say, "What's one thing you're thankful for that Jesus did for you today?" And that's how we always end our night. Like, oh, we're thankful. Usually it's like the toys or I got to play with my friend. Like
not
that's
like
the,
super spiritual things.
No, that's the age
kid things.
The Loma, the burrito, praise the Lord. But like it's just like just they're little. But I because that's what Paul says. The way you defeat anxiety and stress is by giving thanks.
In all circumstances.
Give thanks, and so that's how we end our night. Even in our dinner table too, when we talk, hey, what was the greatest part of your day today?
Yeah.
Or and like I said, at night we say, hey, what's one thing you're thankful for that Jesus did today? And well, I'm thankful for Jesus. He did this.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a constant reminder. I mean, it's we see in the book of Joshua, we see that with with Israelites, God say, hey, remember the things I've done.
Sure.
Put the stone here so that your kids can remember and their kids can remember.
Yeah.
And so I think is putting those stones in those and remember, hey, God, like, this is what he did. Look, we were here, but God did this. So I think it's, reminding them of the goodness of God, who God is, his character, and what he has done and what he's going to do.
And with that, and that's amazing, Steve. With that, I would even add, too, like, often I see parents and like even myself, I found myself now. I do have two. Like my oldest is about to be 3, so it's not like I can have a very intellectual conversation with her at this point. But what I see as a youth pastor, I see often that there is this in some parents there is this expectation that they feel like they cannot get deep with their kids in their conversation. And I think that is ironic because, like, when we send our kids to school, like when they go to school, they're learning like very, very complex thing like calculus, whatever. Like I'm 30 and I don't even know like all this stuff. Like if you ask me to do, like I tell my wife all the time, by the time our daughters are like in 5th grade, I'm not gonna be able to help with any homework because I'm not smart like that.
That's me too.
So we have to understand that like if we sending them to a place where they can learn all of these complex things, they're able to understand truth from the Bible.
Yeah.
And so we're able to have this conversation or we should be able to have this conversation with our kids where they can understand, hey, even though this world may look like it's falling apart, there is a greater hope for us, the fall of God.
Sure.
The ultimate greater hope is that we have, God is going to come and that he's going to restore the chaos. He's going to provide a new way for us, a new way of living and a new system of life, and we're going to be in eternity with him. But even right now, in the midst of this, we have the greater hope that we know that all of these things, God is in control, that he's working those things for his purpose, that there's a reason why things are happening, that our hope is not found in our circumstances, but found on the fact of who he is. His faithfulness.
Yeah.
That's where we bank. And so we can have those conversations with our kid.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like we are afraid because we feel like, oh, it's going to go over their head.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to go over their head. They're learning calculus.
Yeah.
And that's
how you said?
Yeah,
calculus.
Yeah, I didn't learn it.
I think another thing too that's been helpful for me is to learn from older parents, like parents that their kids, like even like with you, like you're having teenage daughters, like that's good to have those questions. Hey, how are you handling this? Like, because I have a daughter, so I'm like, okay, how do you have these conversations? So I think it's important to know to not feel like you're alone as a parent, but that's where the church comes in, right? The church comes in to find, like I have a Monday night discipleship group. It's us, 5 guys. We all have same age kids. We're all husbands, fathers, and our constant prayer goes like, help us be patient with our kids. Like, help us to not go crazy on our kids. Like that's, and so that's a good conversation. We're like, hey, I did this and it helped. Like, and so, but knowing, I know every Monday, hey, I got these guys who we're praying for each other, like we're encouraging, but also finding, and that's something like what helped Jess and I in our marriage. First few years of marriage, even parenting, was finding older couples who kids are out of the house. But they're not perfect, but they love the Lord, all this stuff. And so just learning from them, we meet with them once a month and say like, hey, how should we do this? How do we do this? So having that support system, I think it's important to encourage you to say, hey, man, this is how you talk to them about this issue and not be afraid about it, but having that wisdom from someone who's walked through the same situation you have. So.
Yeah, encouraging one another in that. Right? I think for us too is an understanding that parents who have an authentic daily relationship with Christ are going to, in a much more impactful way, lead their children to have an authentic relationship with Christ in a viewpoint that would be consistent with what God says and sees if we are modeling that, right? So, one of the things with our kids, I pray with two of the kids I take to school every morning early. Every single morning I'm going to pray with them when they're going to school and to start their day. And a lot of that is supplication. It's, Lord, protect the kids today, give them a good day, help them to encourage others, help them to be an encouragement, help them to be faithful to you, keep them healthy, keep them strong, that they would honor you. But then naturally at the end of the day, when we pray before they go to bed, it's much more like Thanksgiving oriented, right? The beginning of the day, it is a lot of, and I'm the one who prays for them when I take them to school, it is very much a supplication of that area of protection, health, safety, testimony, etc. End of the day, it's like, wow, look at what God's done. Thank you for another great day. And the kids will go, like, sometimes, depending on who it's praying, like if it's Leah, our youngest, she'll be like thanking God for Toto, like our dog, for the blanket, for like, the high C she drank. Like it would be whatever. But there's like a progression of like, of hey, dependence on God, thanksgiving to God. And I think that has to flow also, though, from an authentic understanding, like the Lord's the one who we are trusting in, as bad as things get. But also giving our kids a realistic expectation that life's not going to be a breeze either if you're a follower of Jesus. One of my daughters a couple weeks back texted me when she was at school. She was in a study hall and she texted me and she had just mentioned like, hey, I'd really like to just come home, because she was discouraged because of something that happened where kid said something about her that was not kind, and it was embarrassing for her. And, and so I felt bad for her, but at the same time, I wanted her to have the understanding that this is going to be a normal occurrence because we're not in heaven yet. So heartache, discouragement, people making fun of you, people knowing that you're a Christian and they're going to make fun of you because of certain stances you take should be an expected practice. And I just shared with her where Jesus said, that blessed are you when men speak all manner of evil against you, for so they did the prophets. And so I just sent that verse to her, like when she had responded that way, and she responded back like with like a smiley face emoji and was like, thanks, Dad, and like awesome. Appreciate that. And she was encouraged by that. But I think what we tend to forget as parents is God's word has answers even for our kids. And what our kids are battling. We don't have to come up with some magic formula. God gives us answers in his word. But I think sometimes we, in a desire to protect our kids, or to not want them to fear, or not want them to be, worried, we can tend to kind of veil things over that, no, everything will be great, honey. I mean, I think the most important thing we can do is give them God's word. And whenever there's opportunity to insert scripture, to like, hey, listen to what God says. Like for my daughter, I think it was a reminder for her, like, holy cow, like God really knows what he's talking about. Like this happened and it was discouraging, but it almost turned to encouragement for her when she was like, wow, like Jesus said that would happen. And it was kind of like, okay, like, all right, well, if he said it's going to happen, then it happened. He knows what he's talking about. So I think we have to take advantage of those opportunities.
Oh, for sure.
And we'll miss them. I miss them. You'll miss them. But when those opportunities come, we have to be aware of that.
That's a conversation I had with my mom a couple of months ago. Like we were talking about parenting, and like I was like, man, I feel like I'm failing this, But my mom was just like, she's like, honestly, I pray for like your generation of parents, because I see it's harder than it was for us. In the sense of like social media and like especially all that, all the culture, what it's accepting and all this stuff like that. And she's like, I pray that you guys as parents will live out the gospel in front of your kids, but also, like I said, share God's word with them. She's like, you don't need anything else. You have God's word. Like, there's nothing else to be that.
This is a good transition point. I think next week maybe we can hit the social media issue. When it comes to parenting and social media, we can try to kind of tackle that a little bit and maybe get some perspectives from people about that. And so specifically, why don't we say, if you have any questions about social media content, parenting specifically to social media, text in, any questions you have between now and next week when we do this. So kind of get them to us if you can, by Wednesday. And we could try to get those questions in.
That's great.
One last thought before we move on to conclude real quick, because I keep ringing to what you guys were saying, but maybe this is a challenge to the parents or maybe that are listening. Paul says in one of I think it's in Corinthians, but correct me if I'm wrong, but he says, like, be an imitator of me as I imitate Christ. And what a bold statement to say, hey, like, look at how I'm living my life, and you're going to be, in the way I'm living my life is going to point you to Christ. Yeah. And I think that, like, like I said, I have such young daughters that I get to see it right now so clearly. Like my 2-year-old, she's constantly looking for a baby and walking around with the baby and caring for the baby like my wife does to our younger baby that is 10 months old. She's imitating her. Yeah. Why not, as parents, make it a priority where we're so devoted and focused on growing our relationship with God to the point that when the kids are imitating us, they're not imitating necessarily how to care for a baby, but imitating in how we practice all of this spiritual life or spiritual what's the word I'm thinking? Disciplines. Yeah. And what not do that? Why not be people that, like, why not be parents that when the kids see us, they see, like, man, like, yeah, my dad prays for me when he goes to work or when he goes to drop us into school. I need to be praying. My parents, I see them sitting together and they're discussing the Bible. I see them, my dad or my mom, they're reading the Bible. When I come into the room, they have the Bible open. Like, let's do that for our kids so that they are so that they can grow up seeing that. Be imitators of Christ, so that hopefully our kids, by looking at our example, can follow them too.
Yeah, and I think too, even what you mentioned about your daughter seeing your wife with the baby, caring. They should see it in our care for people too, right? Not just in our spiritual disciplines, but in our daily caring for other people, living life in general, how we are towards one another. That rubs off on people.
So the way I interact with people is what I learned from my dad, like how he and my mom, how they talk to people. Like,
it's a high calling, right? Parenting's a high calling.
It's a blessing.
And it's hard. Like, people want to say it's hard. It's hard to parent well. It is a discipline, to parent well. And yet God gives us what we need to do it. So, and we're in it together. But next week, let's plan on the social media aspect of things. And if you have questions about that, text in. Eric knows the number.
Yeah. 3330 3311.
Nope.
No. 3331. Is it 331?
3330.
You guys have me confused now. It's 330-331-6453.
Okay. Last question to end the podcast. Before Steve asks the final question, if you had to choose between Costco or Sam Clubs, where would you shop?
Costco.
I don't know. I'm familiar with Sam's Club. I'm not familiar with Costco.
Okay. Costco.
All right.
What about you?
What about you?
I've only been to Sam's Club, so I get Sam's Club.
So you couldn't either.
There you go. There you go.
But for those of you out there on the group chat or in the chat, let us maybe you should create a group chat, but let us know where you shop.
Yeah. They can comment. Comment below.
Comment below.
Costco.
Why not?
Costco.
Costco or Sam's Club?
Those hot dogs are pretty good.
Yeah, Costco or Sammy? No? No, okay.
Okay.
What's the question?
What's
the question?
What's your... Hold up. What's your life like behind the pew?
What is your life like?
Beyond the pew.
Beyond.
Okay.
Listen, we see them on Sunday.
By episode 31, I'm going to get it, okay?
Okay, try again.
What's your life like beyond the pew?
There it is. We hope it's honored in the Lord.
America,
Join us next week.
We'll
keep going. Bye-bye.